Michael, are you ready? Okay, I call to order this regularly scheduled meeting of the Elgin City Council on this 15th day of June, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. We'll go to roll call. We'll start the roll call with Mayor Pro Tem Brasher.
Brasher here.
Ramirez here.
Vega here.
Gibson here.
Maldonado here.
Callahan here.
Ibis here.
Dennis here.
Let the record show we have a quorum. Councilmember Arriaga is not present but has an excused absence. Next, we'll go to invocation. If we'll bow our heads, please. We ask for strength for a strong back and clear eyes. Help us concentrate our thoughts and actions to the task at hand. We know it will not be easy, but let us be confident it will be worth it. Let us learn to listen and not just hear, and let us not forget to lift our council and our community for the good of all. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Council, let's go back to roll call, and we'll take a motion to excuse Councilmember Arriaga as she has notified us of her absence. We'll start the call with you.
I'll make a motion.
Okay?
Second.
So a motion has been made by Mayor Pro Tem Brasher, seconded by Councilmember Vega to excuse Councilmember Arriaga. Mayor Pro Tem Brasher?
Brasher, yes.
Ramirez, yes?
Vega, yes.
Gibson, yes.
Maldonado, yes.
Callahan, yes.
Ibis, yes.
Dennis, yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. We'll go next to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll please stand, the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll do the Texas flag pledge.
Honor the Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas,
one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Welcome, everyone. Do we have any public comments? No public comments. Okay, we'll move on then. I would like to remind everyone, as this is a business meeting, I will ask everyone not on this dais to please not talk or otherwise interrupt the business meeting as presented. So let's go to our presentation. The first thing under the presentation is a proclamation, June 19th. It's Juneteenth Day in Elgin, Texas. And I have the honor of reading this. It says, proclamation, whereas Juneteenth celebrates African American freedom and achievement while encouraging continuous self-development and respect for all cultures. As it takes on a more national, symbolic, and even global perspective, the events of 1865 in Texas are not forgotten. And whereas the Emancipation Proclamation was signed into law by President Abraham Lincoln on January 1st, 1863, and Major Gordon Granger on June 19th, 1865 in Galveston, Texas, issued a general order declaring that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. And whereas this year, the 22nd Elgin Juneteenth Organization Parade and Celebration were scheduled to be held on Friday and Saturday, June 11th and 12th, but due to the ongoing concerns with COVID-19 and the need to keep everyone safe, the organization, after studying the state's numbers, canceled all scheduled celebrations. And whereas the Elgin Juneteenth Organization desires to continue the observance and commemoration of Emancipation Day in Elgin, Texas, by joining with the NAACP Elgin Branch 6174 and the City of Elgin for the celebration of Freedom Day. And whereas the NAACP with the Elgin Subdistrict Ministries will present an outdoor celebration. Celebrate Juneteenth on Juneteenth. Freedom is not free. At Wynn's Memorial Baptist Church, Reverend D.W. Townsend, pastor, 605 Madison Street, Elgin, with the Fresh Wind Ministry of Waco, Texas, as special guest. And whereas the community will kick off the Memorial Bench Project for Mr. Harvey Westbrook, a civil rights leader, Mrs. Annie Haywood, an educator, and Brother Monty Joe Thomas, gospel recording artist. And whereas the citizens will continue to hold on to the Juneteenth organization theme, let's put unity back into community. Now therefore, I, Ron Ramirez, Mayor of the City of Elgin, Bastrop County, Texas, proclaim June 19, 2021 as Juneteenth Day in Elgin, and urge all citizens to participate in the observance of Juneteenth by celebrating African American freedom, families, heritage, and becoming the ancestor dream. In witness whereof I have set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Elgin, Texas, to be affixed this 15th day of June, 2021. So congratulations, and we're very honored to proclaim Juneteenth and celebrate that day. Do we have anybody here to accept the proclamation?
I think they intended to come, there might have been some confusion about our start time.
Okay, all right. Anyway, congratulations to the Juneteenth program here. Next on the agenda is a proclamation week of June 20th, June 21st through the 26th, Western Days Week, Elgin, Texas. The proclamation reads, whereas the Western Days Festival includes a week of activities and celebrations, including a carnival, concert, parade, live music, arts and crafts, delicious food, entertainment, washer, horseshoe, and volleyball, softball tournaments. And whereas the Western Days Festival is celebrating its 52nd event this year, and whereas Western Days Festival is a celebration of the spirit and tradition of our community, which represents the very essence of the fabric of our community, and whereas the Western Days Festival draws thousands of people back to Elgin every year to celebrate Elgin's heritage and community, to enjoy family and class reunions, and whereas the Western Days Festival has been the main fundraiser for the Elgin Chamber of Commerce, an organization that tirelessly promotes our community throughout the state. And whereas the annual Western Days Festival should be recognized and heralded for strengthening the character of our community, now therefore I, Ron Ramirez, Mayor of the City of Elgin, do hereby proclaim this, the fourth week of June, June 21st to the 26th, 2021, be known as Western Days Week in Elgin, Texas, and call upon the people of Elgin to join their friends and neighbors throughout this community in celebrating the spirit and heritage of our town. In witness whereof, I have set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Elgin, Texas, to be affixed this 15th day of June, 2021. So again, congratulations for the Western Days and the Chamber of Commerce. It's a festival that was sorely missed last year, and we're so happy that they're able to put it on this year. Do we have anyone here that wishes to accept this proclamation? Look at this.
Wow.
Hey, you want to do it facing here, or? Okay, why don't you guys get right here? I'll get into that.
It's so nice Heather gets to be in a picture.
So let me present this to, I guess, to Tim, or? Yeah. Okay, so Tim, we'll just do this, and actually, this gets you in here a little bit closer over there. Do you have everyone?
I've got everybody. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. This leads us on our agenda to the city manager's report. Number one, Tom, departmental monthly report, period ending May 31st, 2021.
Mayor, I don't have any really detailed reports to make tonight. As you know, those are our monthly reports. We're glad to answer any questions about the departmental reports, either tonight or later, if anybody has any detailed questions about them. But I do have a few things I wanted to mention in my report. First is that tonight is the last night for Amelia Sanchez to be here as our city secretary. She's decided she can I guess, go on without working with me further. Amelia's my friend and has, we're sad to see her go, but happy for her retirement to happen and spend more time with her. She's still getting grandkids at her house, so she's glad. I know everybody joins me in wishing her well and thanking her for her service here to the city of Elgin and to me and to the staff. But we also have exciting news, and Jennifer Stubbs is here tonight. Most of you, council, got to meet her briefly last week at our joint meeting with the school board, and Jennifer comes to us with a lot of experience and energy and new ideas, and so we're excited to have her on board, and the council will get used to seeing her and working with her more in the future. So I know you want to wish Amelia good luck and welcome Jennifer to the team here too. Just had a couple other things I wanted to mention. I think the council also joins me in saying we had a really good, productive meeting, I think, with the school board last week. We had a joint work session where we discussed a lot of issues, and all agreed that that's a long time coming and something we probably need to do on a more regular basis. It's interesting to get the confirmation that while we have dramatically different roles in the community, at the same time, we're really facing the same issues today of historic growth at a level that can almost be overwhelming if we don't work together, if we don't think forward, if we're not ready to make tough decisions about recognizing the needs for growth. But it was a great presentation by their demographer, who basically took a totally different analysis of the raw numbers of growth, and yet came to the same basic conclusion that we're going to see serious growth in this community. And just like us, if the school district is not aggressively involved in expanding its facilities and resources just within the next 2 years, or at least getting started on that, we're going to be in trouble. And that's the same thing for the city. So maybe it was just good to hear that we're not the only ones in this mess, right? Pete's in there with us to have to deal with some of the same issues. So wanted to mention too quickly, Amy was going to give a brief update on our status of our swimming pool and library just as how operations are going. We as council knows, we continue to try to evolve appropriately all of our operations as we come out of COVID and social distancing type requirements, and so we've had some challenges with staffing at the pool and with change and making our public facilities completely wide open. But as Amy, I think, is going to touch on, operationally, we continue to move towards normal times, and one of the things we discussed today is I think all of our facilities, we're going to go to a concept that you see in most businesses now, where masks aren't required, social distancing isn't required. We can't really require it, but we're not going to require it for our buildings for folks that are fully vaccinated. At the same time, we're going to continue to try to be sensitive to those folks that are looking for protection where we can provide it. So with that background, I just thought Amy would give you a little update. Encouraging news, it looks like we're going to be able to open the pool, and we're going to do more opening here at the library. So,
Amy, would you move this a little bit so you're sharing the camera? There you go.
And is this on? Am I good? Okay, thanks, Michael. So the library has been open for customers to come in person for quite a while now, but the staff is recommending we're going to implement an hours change to kind of adjust our accessibility to the community. We have a lot of folks who want to access the library earlier in the morning in particular. So on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we will be open from 9 to 7. On Wednesdays and Fridays from 9 to 5. And then on Saturdays, the library will be open from 9 to 2. And all the programming that we've been rolling out again, we're now doing story time in person. We do still offer some virtual programming. In particular, if you're looking for some fun cooking suggestions, Melinda does a really great recipes cooking virtual thing. But yeah, so we're doing a combination of virtual and in person, but those will be new hours starting the 28th, that Tuesday after Western Days. And then for the pool, we will be open for the 4th of July weekend.
Yay.
So yay. We are still in the midst of training some of our newest hires, but we will be able to offer water aerobics and reservation lap swimming similar to what you saw last year. It is a much smaller staff than what we traditionally have when we run a full schedule and we're open essentially 7 days a week. So it will still be that modified schedule that we talked about, but we are successfully hiring and training. And so you have that to look forward to. And then the recreation center, the 1st of July, we will not use the capacity limits anymore. We've been trying to kind of manage the numbers of people in the facility. But again, as the vaccination rates are increasing and the COVID-19 rates in general are continuing to decrease, we are able to bring back more programming and to remove those capacity limits. So in general, we encourage the wearing of a mask if you're not fully vaccinated and social distancing where possible, and to just generally all be kind to each other. And we're glad to have our facilities being more and more accessible.
And Amy, we're still looking for lifeguards.
Oh, yes.
Somebody
I mean,
wants a
you're
job.
welcome to still apply. There's a swim test to pass, and it is, it's a physical job ultimately, and certainly going to be willing to be outside. But we are excited about the young people that we have on staff.
Thank you. Yeah, she's good. Mayor, just had one more item I thought I'd touch on briefly, since we've got, again, a pretty new council. We hadn't really talked about council travel, training things. I'd reached out to the new members and reminded them that this is TML has a standard workshop every year, that work session after elections were to provide orientation for new council members. And Councilman Ivis responded to that about going, and so I thought we'd just say quickly run down our general policy for council and travel trainings, just like pretty much like staff. So the staff be glad to help out. At the same time, in this one in particular, I don't know if you looked at it more. It's pretty easy to go on site and register and all that. So there's a process to go through. If any travel, any training you do for the job, you just reach out to HR, and we have a form to fill out, and you'll get reimbursed for all those costs. If there's TML events like the conference, where generally we have a number of members going, if we can pay directly for the registration, we will, and that's fine for you to charge it off to us. But basically, all you need to do, whatever, council has a line item in their budget every year for travel and training, and frankly, we never use all that money, so we don't have, it's pretty much a judgment call for if you all think something is applicable to the job and you want to go to, it's kind of your individual call. But if whatever expenses you have, you just turn them into staff, we'll reimburse you for those. We ask the council members just follow the same rules staff does, and that's all in the personnel policy about spending limits, meals and all that. So, but any individual questions you have about that, if you'll just reach out to HR, the staff can answer those for you there. So, but like I said, if you need any help, we'd be glad to try to help. But truthfully, in my experience, we try to do for everybody, almost inevitably somebody's reservation gets messed up or something. Sometimes it's just better for you to do it yourself, and then we'll reimburse you for those costs. So I didn't mean to not respond to your email. I knew we were going to talk about it, and I just thought we'd jump on it real quick here. Any questions about any of that? And like anything, if you have any questions, call me. That's all I have, Madam Report.
I did want to mention on the departmental monthly reports, if you saw them, you could almost, without even looking, know what's happening. The ones that you think are going to get higher, got higher, and the ones that you think are going to get lower, got lower. The municipal court, with the situation that we have, we know that that's, a work in progress. Our development services just straight up, shooting straight up. Our library, well, right now, the library is down a little bit, but I'm sure that's going to pick up as it gets out, that the library is back open. So, I mean, when you look at all the different monthly reports, it's almost, it makes sense if that makes sense. It makes sense whether they're going up or down or staying even. So did council have any comments or any questions about the monthly report, departmental monthly reports?
I had a quick question on the rise in theft.
Okay, the what?
The rise in theft
Okay.
at 180%. Do we happen to have the data? Is it in the same area? Are we stepping up patrols? What are we doing as far as
I
that?
don't know. Chief, can you speak to that at all? The numbers have gone up on thefts. Is that attributable to any certain thing, or is it in a particular area of town? Or?
From 5 to 14, from May 20 to May 21, when you're comparing the 2 months.
The, that's going to be.
Chief, I'm going to ask you to step up here so you can be on the camera, please.
The thefts are directly related to the catalytic converter thefts that have been occurring either at Myers, at their place. They've had 3 so far. Jay's Automotive has had several, and with their camera system, they've got some fairly good photographs of the last event. Then also with the break-in of this is more recent, of the Thomas Park concession stand. But and shopliftings are up, which all of those fall into that category.
Okay. And are we stepping up patrols within those areas since they are confined?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And even Jay's has made the special request, and we go in and sit in their parking lot, and he's got a camera system that would rival the NSA, and and it's always we don't worry about it. But does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
And as always, Mayor, any detailed questions about more specifics, we'd be glad to follow up on that if anybody wants those on anything in the report. But you make a really good point, Mayor, that we have to remember this year we're still coming out of normalcy, so some of the numbers will change dramatically.
And it also wouldn't hurt, council, if you know that you have a question about something, to go ahead and email it early so that we can do some research and maybe even get you a better answer.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay, you did the general activities as well?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
That's my report. Unless anybody had any other questions for me on anything I didn't touch on.
Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. All of the items on the consent agenda are considered to be self-explanatory by the council and will be enacted with one motion, 1 second, and 1 vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member removes an item from the consent agenda and places it on the new business section for discussion and action. The 2 items listed under the consent agenda currently are the City Council regular meetings minutes of June the 1st, 2021, and item number 2 under the consent agenda is consideration of a request by the Sacred Heart Catholic Church as part of their annual fiesta on September 4th through the 5th, 2021, to number 1, waive the open container ordinance for September 4th, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., and on September 5th from 3 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. And number 2, allow live music to continue at Elgin Memorial Park until 10 p.m. on Sunday, September the 5th. Are there any questions or comments on any of the items under the consent agenda? If not, I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
So the motion was made by Councilmember Vega, seconded by Councilmember Dennis. to approve the consent agenda as presented. Councilmember Vega, you'll start the vote.
Vega, yes.
Gibson, yes.
Maldonado, yes.
Callahan, yes.
Ibis, yes.
Dennis, yes.
Frazier, yes.
Ramirez, yes. Motion passes unanimously. Yes.
Part of the request that we had to make by the Spanish not
We, Pete, the only waivers required are the first two things you asked for. The setup and takedown and closing off the parking lot, that, anybody that rents the park, they already have the authority to do that. So the items, those first two are the only things you're required to get council waivers on.
Okay. Moving on. New business, item number 1 under new business. An ordinance of the City of Elgin, Texas, amending the amount of appropriations for the general fund as well as all other funds that provide for the payment of operating and capital expenditures, and by changing the amount appropriated for various departments of the city as originally adopted by ordinance number 2020-09-0826, adopted September 8, 2020, in accordance with the local government code of the state of Texas and the ordinance and rules of the City of Elgin, Texas, appropriating the various amounts thereof and repealing all ordinance or parts of ordinances in conflict therewith, and providing for publication and an effective date. Before we do that, do we need to do anything, Amy? Okay, go ahead. City Manager, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is for a routine annual budget amendment that we make every year. There's typically, for all cities, there's at least one mid-year budget amendment, and then there's one kind of end-of-the-year budget amendment. So Charles has got a rather detailed presentation to make tonight to make sure we provide all the information and the numbers. So Charles, go ahead.
Charles, do me a favor, please, and move the dais up closer so you're on the camera. Okay, you're good.
He kind of needs to point at stuff on
Okay.
there as we go, so that's why he's trying to stay close to it.
Mayor, council, this is an annual ritual that we go through. When the original budget is adopted in October or September for the fiscal year, my experience in the other 5 cities that I've worked in was that by October 2nd, it's kind of out of date because you can't anticipate everything that's going to happen during the year. There's staffing changes, there's emergencies, there's all kinds of things that happen during the course of the year that require some adjustments in both revenue and the expenses. So normally we have 2 amendments during the year. One is kind of a mid-year correction, and the other one would be in September, just before the fiscal year closes. One of the things that makes it challenging here in Elgin is that in most rapidly developing cities, you have the revenue kind of lags behind the expenses that you have to put out as your population grows. You have to make adjustments in both the expenditures and the revenue. One of the things that happens, though, at a certain point, you kind of reach a tipping point where the revenues begin to be able to cover the expenses. And fortunately, we're in that situation this year. It happened a little bit faster than I thought it would because when I did the revenue forecasting at the beginning of the year, I was very conservative, mostly because of COVID and we didn't know what was going to happen. But the development in the last or the first 6 months of the year has just taken off. And you'll see that reflected in the revenue figures that we have. So what I want to do is go through each one of the funds. So we'll start out with the general fund. And we have the general fund, the utility fund, debt service, internal service, and special revenue, EDC, and TERS. So we'll cover all of those funds. I'm prepared, if you want to go over the 5,000 accounts that we have individually. If you don't want to do that, I can kind of summarize, and that's what the presentation is designed around, is that I can just summarize for each fund what the major changes are. So we'll get on that. The general fund, the first one on the revenue side, we look at the history of the last couple of years, the first 6 months of the year, and then make adjustments and projections to the end of this fiscal year. In the same way with the appropriations. We have, in this case, because we're growing so rapidly, normally we wouldn't change the staffing schedule, but I think it's important that because of the changes that are being made, that we go ahead and have the council be aware of some of the staffing changes that we're going to have mid-year, which is a little bit unusual, but I'll go over each one of those. And each one of those changes are already reflected in the expenditure part of each of the funds. So we'll go to the next one. Go on to the next.
Hey, Charles, let's, wait a minute. We just want to clarify for the council. We realize that the council hasn't had these numbers to review. It was important for us because of their voluminous and detailed content that I just want to clarify for everybody, you're just getting the numbers here tonight. And so for that reason, we're not expecting the council to necessarily vote on that tonight. They can, it's positioned to do that. The numbers aren't going to change, but we want to make sure, just before we get too far into it, if the council decides at the end of this, you need more time to study it, that'll be fine. It's not we'll have to pass this amendment at some point, but we don't necessarily have to pass it tonight. So just make sure everybody understands that before we get into it.
I would like to say that if you do have any questions about individual things, I'm usually in my office. You can come by, let me know when you want to talk about it, and I can go over in quite a bit of detail of each one of the items if you have any questions about anything that shows up on the amendment. So the format, just to give you an orientation, there's 5 columns in each on each page, and we start with the adopted budget, and then the year-to-date is actual is through March, and then the next column is whatever proposed increase or decrease, whether revenue or expenditures, the amount, and then the amended amount will be the adopted plus or minus the increase or decrease to give the amended amount, and the percentage increase or decrease is just the increase or decrease over the adopted amount, and that's where that percentage comes from. So if you look on actually the exhibit that was passed out with the ordinance, you'll see these different columns. The good news is that based on the collections to date and compared to the original adopted budget, we're looking at a significant 26% increase in revenue throughout the fiscal year. We started out, you can see, $9.5 million as the adopted expected revenue. Year to date, we're already at $7.5 million. And so I'm expecting in these several areas increases netting out at $2.5 million. So the amended total is $12 million. That's huge. Now, what that does, and if you'll see on the expenditure side, this is an overview. The expenditure side is about $261,000. That includes, I'll get into it a little bit later, increasing development services. And if we do that, if we increase the amount of staff and inspectors, and we get the building official, we'll be able to save even more money that the developers are paying, because right now we're paying ATS to do that, and they're charging a lot more than what it would cost for us to do it ourselves. So there's even a room for a lot more savings here, and that number could go higher. Okay, any questions about that? It's really good news. Like I said in the beginning, you reach that tipping point to where suddenly you start generating a lot more revenue than what you ever had before, and you're able to do a lot more things than what you were able to do before. If you go back 2 or 3 years, we had actually a deficit in the amount that was the revenue minus the expenditures. So this is, last year we made $800,000, $860,000. This year we're expected to make $2,223,000 net increase in revenue over expenditures. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that this increase in the revenue will just get us to where when you pass the reserve policy that we did about 1.5 years ago, we set that at 15% of the operating funds plus $250,000 for litigation and another $500,000 for maintenance. So we're looking at $2,750,000. Well, that difference here, that's going to just about cover what our reserve position is, but at least we have that. So this is not to say that we have this surplus money that can be used for additional expenses this year. Most of that will go into the reserve position. But going forward, it bodes well for the years that are coming up, because we're going to have a lot more funds to work with. Yes, sir.
Charles, explain to everyone what the reserve fund is and why it's so important.
It's mostly to have cash in the bank for emergencies. You should have, the rule of thumb is that you have 3 months operating expenses just in case anything happens. A disaster, natural disaster. COVID was one of the things that would have been affected by this. But that's the rule of thumb for most cities. They usually have 3 months expenses in the bank ready in case the bottom fell out of the revenue and you had to operate over time. And then we have the 2 things, like I said, for litigation, in case of lawsuits, we have an amount of $250,000 set aside. We've had those in the past, but we didn't have the reserve to cover that. Another is $500,000 for maintenance in case of like the winter storm that we had here. We were able, fortunately, there were through grants and things, we're able to recover from that. So that didn't affect us that much, but that's what that money's for. The reserve, you have to have that. That's one of the things that the rating agencies knocked us down on, and that's why the rating went from A to BAA, is because we didn't have any reserves, and we didn't have any means of getting it. Once we get back to where we have sufficient reserves, that should bode well for the next bond issue to where our rating will go up. So, anything else?
Yes.
Any other questions on that?
That's great news.
It is great news. Okay. So, just looking at the revenue on the, this is mostly for developer fees. As you see, I started out $120,000. Year to date, we've already collected $545,000. So I'm anticipating we'll get another $950,000. That's over $1 million. inspection fees at $600,000. I'll talk a little bit later about if we have our own inspectors, we can actually make that much greater than $600,000 increase. So between these two things, that's where the increase in the revenue is coming from.
And we just want to make the point here, Charles, that we did raise fees a couple of years ago.
Yeah, that
but-
was
but-
one of the things.
But the only thing we did, we measured that to make sure our fees are still appropriate, and they're about middle of the road with all other cities and what they charge. And as you said, the important thing to understand about this is as little as 3 years ago, we were actually running a deficit, where taxpayers in town were actually paying for the cost of development. I think that's the other important part of this message we want to share with people is and we're not getting a lot of complaints from developers or builders. Our fees are reasonable, and this provides assurance to folks in town that it's another example of how we're making new development pay for itself, and current taxpayers don't bear that cost.
Yeah, at the time when I brought that to council, there were some questions about, if we raise the fees, if we double the fees, in a lot of cases, that will retard growth and nobody will want to come here. Well, actually it didn't, because we've had really spectacular growth, and the developers write those checks without a second, hesitation. So all of those fears kind of went away. And we expect that to happen. Again, this was happening during a lot of the COVID stuff, so I'm sure as that recedes and the weather gets warmer and the building kind of kicks into higher gear, these are still a little bit lower than what they could probably actually work out to be. On the fines and forfeitures, I just want to point out, because of the course being closed, I reduced the amount of fines that we're going to get. The code enforcement liens, I just want to point out, I had 35,000, we've only put 1663, but when I got here, nobody was paying attention to the loans, and so I had one of my staff people go through and collect all those, and that's actually receivable that we wouldn't have gotten if we hadn't dug into it and figured it out. I don't think we'll get 35,000 this year, but I've lowered that to 10,000, but it's something that would have been left on the table if my staff hadn't dug into it and figured out exactly how much was owed.
Charles, I have a question. And are you going to go into sales tax anymore, or have we already passed that?
Sales tax, I estimated pretty aggressively this year, and so it's only looking at about a $54,000
Right.
increase over what my estimate was, so.
So that was based on an aggressive estimate then? Because the sales tax has been outstanding for the,
Yeah, well, it was last year, and so I boosted it up quite a bit for this year.
Okay.
So there
And
wasn't
but
that
we're
much
still
difference.
sustaining that?
Huh?
But we're still sustaining that?
Every month, I'm shocked. I mean, I don't think we've been below 200,000, which before, in years past, if we hit 200,000 plus, in 2 or 3 months, that was a good year, but we hit 200,000 plus almost every month. So, and we hit 300,000 1 month last year, so.
So the reason it's doesn't show as great an impact is because you were very aggressive in your estimate?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the one thing we had a good year last year in revenue on, probably, yeah. Right.
I even lowered it a little bit from last year because I didn't think that could be sustained, but it's showing that it's sustainable. So,
Okay.
we'll see that. Just want to point out on the expense or on the revenue side too. We used to charge the Elgin ISD $75,000 for doing the SRO program, and they're doing away with that. So I had to reduce that by $75,000. The other thing that's kind of notable is the CARES Act. Again, my staff did a really good job in collecting all this information. Everybody, all the operating departments contributed to that. We were allocated $503,000. We got $100,000 last year, and the balance of $403,000 was paid So that helps considerably. Okay, any question about the revenue? We're having a really good year. On the expenditure side, I just want to point out some of the major things. In finance and HR, I'll get into a little bit of the staffing changes that we're going to make. One of the things is I put an additional 10,000 in for a part-time person, and this has some reclassifications implications in it too. The development services, this anticipates another 110,000 additional for payment to ATS for building and inspection services or plan review. And that's where the 111,000 increase came. On the permits, we're still gonna have to pay ATS until we get our own inspectors and our own building official. So, that went up 417,000. So, you have to spend money to make money. So this is the expense part of it, and that's why that went up to the 105,000 increase, 105% increase. The telecommunications, this was that deal we made with Bastrop, where they're doing the dispatching. We replaced 2 dispatchers that were not, we had vacant positions, so we're not filling those. Community services, the recreation program and swimming, we've already talked about. Amy described what was happening with the pool operations, and the same with recreation. So I dropped the expenses on that one too. And that's about all on that. So
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Charles.
no, go ahead.
I have a question. I don't think I've ever seen this before, but are you saying that the police budget is under budget?
Under budget.
Well, I mean,
They
It
aren't.
was over budget. No, there is all of the negative amounts are salary savings. Because we've had a difficult time keeping patrols officers, and every time we hire a new one, they come in at a lower rate than what the old ones would be.
The negative amount you're
So-
showing on this report is what we're proposing to cut the budget,
Right.
basically. But once
Mostly-
again, all those things, like you said, the city's in the service business. We spend most of our money on personnel, and in many cases, we've had difficulty keeping those positions staffed. So we're reducing the budget here in virtually every case, but it won't impact services. It's savings we've experienced over the year because we haven't had all those positions.
I've never seen the police department budget.
No, that's what I wanted to clarify, Mayor. I'm sure they won't end up on their budget. The chief will be doing his part the last half of the year.
Chief, I was gonna.
No, but
This amendment just means we can cut their budget that much without adversely affecting services
Well,
or
I
staff.
need to clarify too, that when I put the budget together, I do it based on full staffing.
Right.
The cost of full staffing is though we're gonna have 100% every job filled every year. But that's never the case, and so as you go through, after 6 months or so, you can kind of tell, okay, we had vacancies for 2 months here and for that position or that position. And those are salary savings that they're actually savings, and so you can cut the budget and cut appropriation for that amount.
But it often gets eaten up in overtime, so I'm just very happy with that.
Sometimes, but because of our history, I had plugged in a great amount of overtime, so, and the chief's been really good about kind of monitoring that and keeping it down to where it's a lot less than what it used to be.
But alas, we have festivals now.
That'll make a difference.
Okay, so I've gone through each one of these. If you go on these page numbers in the budget itself, you'll see the actual individual line items that affect these amounts. If there's any questions on any of those, I'd be happy to.
You mean this document, that's the page number, not the budget?
Right.
Yeah. Ready?
Again, if, you know, this is going to take a little bit of study, but I'm just showing you if, on this, if you go to those page numbers, you'll see the detail of each one of those.
I have a question.
Sure.
Ron, back on the police budget, that, clearly, we have a lot more in the budget than the police officers that we have on hand. How much of that is due to police officers or open positions that are yet to be filled?
Right now, I don't know, where are we looking at as far as open
We
positions?
have one detective and 3 patrol positions.
Yeah. Councilman, what I do is, in making these projections, is take what actual savings we had and then project forward again 100% full staffing.
Right.
So the money will be there if we had full staffing for the whole time.
This is the true, basically the true savings we experienced in the first 6 months of the year, right? Right, Charles?
Right.
It's not, it won't adversely affect, so it doesn't really have anything to do with positions we have open now. As soon as we fill them, we can make this adjustment. We can make this adjustment, this amendment, and we'll still have all the money we need to hire every officer.
Yeah, there's still plenty of money. If we were fully staffed from now until September 30th, we'd have enough money in the appropriated to cover all those expenses.
And that's true in every department.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, on the utility fund, there's on the revenue side, the water services, that's basically based on our wholesale water agreement with Aqua, which was just put in last year, and I didn't have any experience to know exactly how much they're going to use. This is also for the new developments that are going in, and so they're buying a lot more water from us than what I anticipated, so that's where the $217,000 comes from. The sewer sales and service, the minus $90,000, our flows are a little bit down for this year, and that's kind of reflected in the amount of billing that we had, so I just cut it 90%, or $90,000 for this year. On the expenditure side, the increases in administration, 26,000 of it was for additional engineering expenses. Bo did a lot of engineering. We had a lot of expenses, mostly because of the winter storm and things that I'd put in 5,000 and we'd already spent 26,000, so I raised it to 34,000 or 37,000. Utility billing, that increase is, I'm going to ask for another meter reader. We're on the verge of going to cycle billing, and that's going to need another meter reader and probably a clerk, but I'm going to put off getting a new clerk until the next year. But that's where that additional expense comes from. Utility maintenance, again, we had a lot of problems with our lift stations, and that's just a reflection of those increased costs.
Charles, I have a question. On the, you said you're going to ask for another meter reader because we're going to cycle,
Two-cycle billing.
and tell me what that means.
That means instead of billing everybody at the same time at the first of the month, we'll bill part of them on the 15th and part of them on the 1st. And so it kind of doubles the amount of work that has to be done, but it evens out. It helps distribute the workload among the clerical staff. So most cities do that. The bigger you grow, eventually, I think Round Rock has 4 cycles. Every week they bill a quarter of their customers. But it's something that we expect to have additional because of the development and because of the deal we're trying to work with Aqua to where we take over a lot of their customers. We just trying to get ahead of it, be proactive, and establish that two-cycle billing so that it'll make it a lot easier for the staff as we go forward.
I guess you could kind of liken it to trash days.
Excuse me?
To trash days. We all have different trash days, but we all pay.
Right.
So it's spread
Yeah,
out.
it's, eventually, I mean, there'll be one kind of disruption when you go from when we implement it, but after that, it'll be just on a monthly basis. Everybody will still get billed for a month. Some will be 15th to the 15th, and others will be the 1st to the 1st.
So it's just even, it's to even the workload out.
Yes. The transfers out, this is amounts that are transferred from the water and sewer funds into the debt service fund. And one of the things, again, that the rating agencies or our bonds that say that we're too reliant on water and sewer revenues to subsidize general fund operations. So the plan is to begin to cut that down by 10% a year until we get to a point where it's an actual amount that the general fund operations does work for the utility, for the water and sewer. Right now, if you look on that page, it's we're that's on page 31. We're transferring almost $1.3 million, I think, between the water and sewer into the general fund to subsidize that fund. As you see with the increase in the revenue that we have for the general fund, we're relying less on the water and sewer rates. So that will help us when we do redo the rates again. It'll be down 20%. So when we do the rates for the new debt, we'll have to raise them less if we're relying less on the water and sewer to subsidize the general fund. Is that clear?
I think I understand that, yeah. So we're, that's the benefit of this, of relying less on the.
Right. There's two parts of it. One, it'll help greatly with our rating. And once we tell them that we've got a plan to reduce.
With our
that-
rating, bond rating, financial rating?
Yes. Yeah. It'll almost assure us of an upgrade to the next time we go out for launch. Okay. But even at that, the revenue, we're looking at about a $300,000 surplus at the end of the year for the utility fund. Okay? So that fund's doing pretty well too. On the debt service, there's not a whole lot to talk about there. The decrease in property taxes is because it took me a little while to figure out that the way they were allocating the property tax revenue, they weren't doing it to the TERS. So I had assumed that it was going all, what was in the general fund was the amount that was allocated to the general fund, but it was allocated the general fund and the TERS, so I had to take that out. When I took that out, that reduced property taxes across the board.
But it's still enough to cover our
Oh, yeah.
obligations.
Yeah, in that case, you can see we've got a $400,000 surplus in that fund. And we already had about a $600,000 surplus, which for next year, when you set the tax rate on, for the debt portion of the tax rate, we're going to be able to go down quite a bit.
But that's exactly the situation we were trying to capitalize on with the COs.
Right.
We could have absorbed the impact without going up on the tax rate.
That's why, when we talked about that, the debt, the general fund, or the general government portion of that debt, the $10 million that we wanted to sell, it wouldn't have cost us anything more in the tax rate. We could have kept the tax rate the same and still generated the same amount of revenue to recover even the new debt that was going on. But
So is the
since-
TERS still collecting its set amount that it's?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, until that will probably go on for the next 20 or 30 years. But it's doing pretty well, too. I'll show you. The Internal Service Fund is a new fund, and basically that's a revolving fund. We charge each of the general fund and utility fund for services that we provide in IT, in building and equipment. The service charges I'm having to increase up to $144,000. I allocated because we had the problem with, we had a $28,000 expense to repairing the roof at the police department, and we have another $23,000 that we're going to have to repair some other roofs because of hail damage. And we've applied to TML for insurance reimbursement, but I just got notified today that they're going to deny the claim because first of all, it's like at the Chamber of Commerce building, that building's so old that they won't cover it. I mean, they won't give us any reimbursement. It's over 50% of its useful life, and they won't provide any payment for that. Same thing with the others. We've got a 1% deductible on the total value, that's $37,000, and our expenses are about $23,000. So we're not. What I did was increase the rates that everybody pays into the building internal service fund to cover those expenses. So that's where the $144,000 comes from. But even at that, we should still have a pretty good increase in that fund, in that reserve for that, for the internal services. Special revenue funds, not a whole lot to talk about here. I did, when I first got here, the cable, the Leo's police training was embedded in the cable franchise fee for some reason. I never could figure that out. So this year, I'm separating out the Leo's and the cable franchise fee. And that's just basically that change that I'm making there. Yeah,
Charles, do you mind going back to the Internal Services Fund?
sure.
The IT Internal Services, tell me what that is and what we're accomplishing with that.
What it allows you to do is it very much streamlines the accounting process, because before we were charging every department and every division for their portion of anything related to electricity, to all the billing expenses, same way with equipment, trying to charge each one of the divisions for the equipment that they had. And that becomes an accounting nightmare because you have to keep up with all that stuff. This way, what we do now is we charge them based on a rental rate for equipment, which is much easier to do. And then all of the expenses, all the invoices come into equipment services, and they pay it out of there. That way we don't have to distribute it. It's already done. So it streamlines tremendously the accounting process. And since I only have 3 people in my department, myself being one, any way that I can streamline that process is a good thing.
And is that for the cost of paying for a new program? And it would be a continuous cost, or?
Oh, yeah, these are monthly rental rates
Okay.
that are charged
All right, I
every
understand.
month for every year going forward.
I understand.
But that's the way the big cities do it. You go to Austin, you go to any of the larger cities, they have an internal service, they have a revolving fund, and I first did this when I was in Ventura, California. That's the easiest and best way to account for these types of expenses, the IT stuff. And that way you don't have to go down, well, how many computers do I need to buy for municipal court this year? It takes all that away, because we have a master inventory, and we just replace those out of this fund as we need them. It doesn't make any difference where it is.
Okay.
Tracking it this way, though, also gives the council and the public a clearer view of what we invest as a city. I think that's one of the things for IT example, for information technology, if you looked at individual budgets, you probably wouldn't recognize right away that we spend over $500,000 every year maintaining those systems. Building services are the same thing. So it really gives everybody a clearer understanding in its entirety what the city is investing in these services that all departments use. You got a few more slides to go, so. You want to go to the next one?
Go back one to the, yeah. You know, we charge the water impact fee and the wastewater impact fee, and that's charged per house. And that's another thing that both group TRC helped us. If you remember, we revised the impact fee rate and increased it substantially. That's another thing that people are going, oh no, people won't come here if we pay that much. But you can see the impact of that, particularly on the wastewater revenue. I had estimated what this is based on what we had before, annual. We're going to collect over $1,200,000 this year. And on water, $423,000. Which will help us fund a lot of the expansion of some of these systems. Because that's what it's based on. Okay? The EDC, Owen's not here. One of the things on the sales tax, it went up to $204,000. That's because the EDC board, when I presented the original budget to them, one member of the board, thought that was just outrageous and that they would never be able to get that amount of money. So I lowered it quite a bit, but based on what our collections are, we'll get almost $1 million this year in sales tax for the EDC. Not a whole lot on the expenditure side. These reductions on the salaries and benefits were because Brooke went from full-time employee to part-time employee. So that results in a savings there. The telephone, this never should have been in there in the first place. And so that was just an adjustment that I had to take out. Nothing here. The reason why I reduced the principal amount and the interest was that the loan that the EDC made to pay back the $2,083,000 to the general, or to the 2016 COs had a grace period for the first year and a half, which includes this fiscal year, so we didn't need to put any principal amount in there. So that's why that was taken out. Then the tax increment reinvestment zone, again, there's an adjustment in current taxes, but other than that, everything pretty much stays the same. Okay?
Can you go back and repeat what you said about the EDC and the grace period and that whole section right there?
If you recall, the council approved a loan from the general fund, well, from the 2016 COs in a kind of an advance to purchase the land that was bought, 60 acres. We thought at the time, it was thought that selling the land would repay the 2016, but during the 2-year period, it wasn't happening, and I knew we were getting close to getting the wastewater treatment plant, need to fund that, the expansion, so the EDC, the only thing, they could either sell bonds or do a commercial loan. They do a commercial loan for $2,083,000 and paid back the 2016 COs.
But the $110,000 was their payment we thought they were going to have to make this year. They don't have to make that payment in this fiscal year on that loan, so
Right.
that's why we're taking it out of the budget.
I see.
Yeah, because I'm thinking that with the activity that's going out there now, which the two members of the board realize that we're really beginning to attract some buyers out there, I think we'll be able to sell quite a bit of land and repay that well in advance of what the scheduled payout is. Any questions about that?
Well, I'd just like to say on the recap of the financial report, it is very good news for us, but not exactly unanticipated. This is exactly the outcome that we had planned for and hoped for. We're going to have, as long as our year continues, the net result is the general fund will experience about a $2 million surplus, which an operating surplus, which is exactly what we had anticipated, and will finally put us back in where we should be in the reserve, cash reserve position, as Charles said before. This was also part of the plan, again, with the COs moving forward. We thought we'd have the money to move forward on those capital projects at the same time as County Line Road Phase 1 plans were prepared. This was all part of an anticipated schedule, a sequence of events that we thought would happen, that now has kind of been jammed up by the position council was forced into relative to the COs. So, but it is very important for us, I believe, to recognize that while the surplus this year is a great thing, that it needs to go into reserves and not be seen as an opportunity to address some of these other capital needs. As Charles has said, we've gotten dinged by the auditor every year on both issues of not having sufficient reserves and relying too much on water and sewer fees to supplement the general fund. So in both cases, we're addressing those, as the mayor and others have said. We know this was an issue with our bond rating. I'm confident that by the end of this year, or the next bond rating we go to, we'll be able to anticipate an upgrade. So it's really good news, and we feel really good about where we're at. But as Charles is going to get into here in a minute, again, we're in this position where development services, our building services activity, as we've shown you tonight, is really not only paying for itself, but helping us on the revenue side. So I think that's a really important message for people in town to understand, that not only is new development paying its own cost, they're they're helping us financially with the other issues. And as Charles is going to get into here in a minute, we're actually have reached the tipping point where we think we can even run a more efficient operation that'll have more positive revenue flow if we hire our own building official and our own building inspectors, which in turn I think will actually produce a better service. Not that ATS does a great job, a lot of people use them, but anytime you can have city employees and we do a job than a private contractor, we think we can even provide a better service to not only developers, but just folks in town that are trying to do more activity. We're seeing more individual lots, and so hopefully we'll be able to do that. But that's the next part. Charles is going to speak briefly about some staffing changes. Again, I guess I want to stress before we get into this part, just like the budget, this isn't a material change. We're using the same numbers we've shown you. So when we talk about restructuring here, doesn't represent a net increase in cost. We think we can manage it in a way that in the budget, the amended budget is reflected here. But we'll run over those real quick here. Charles, go ahead.
You know, all of the expenditures that were shown in the general fund and the utility fund are sufficient to cover all these changes. It's not going to be additional money that's going to be required. The first thing I wanted to do was, like I said, I have a staff of 3 people on the financial side, and the financial analyst that we hired, she's here tonight, has been absolutely terrific. I don't know what I would have done without her. And as part of a transition plan, because I'm not going to be here forever, and the mayor knows how old I am. I'm working way past my retirement time, and so my days are numbered here. So part of that transition plan would be to go ahead and approve an upgrade from the financial analyst to the finance officer. And we'll probably make another change in October, but this is something that we need to do immediately.
Charles, did you say she's here? Would you introduce her?
This is Misty Knock, if you want to stand up.
Hi.
Welcome.
She came from, fortunately, she has a lot of years of experience, 18 years in Lamarck and Alvin. And I don't hold the Gulf Coast against her, but she did a terrific job, and it's really delightful to have somebody who's gone through all the things that the city goes through financial wise, and she's proven herself perfectly capable to eventually take over my position. So this is part of the transition process.
But this is an example, this is an upgrade in position, not a net gain in number of employees.
The next one is development services. What I want to do right now, we're at 3. The original adopted budget had 3 positions. I want to add 2, basically building inspectors. If we do that, we can save on what we're paying ATS and get, I think, a little bit better service because there'll be local people and they'll be more in tune with what our local subdivision ordinances and things are. So it's a win-win for everything. It costs us less money, but we get really a better service out of it. So the question is, where are we going to put them? And so part of the plan going forward is to flip the municipal court where it is now over into where Melissa and the planning people are now, and then move them into the municipal court area. That'll give us a little bit more room to where we can put 5 people in there. There's 3 right now. And those 3 can go into where the planning section is right now. And the bonus of that is that when David moves into my office, old office, and the building inspector or building official is there, you'll have the whole planning and development services in one area. So it's just something that makes a lot of sense and we need to do. But adding those two positions would be a really good financial move for the city. The telecom officers, we talked about this, we're contracting with Bastrop now, so we're gonna go ahead and reduce those two positions, and we'll see what happens in October going forward and see what we do there. But for right now, those two positions, and going forward, I don't think we're gonna need them. We talked about on the lifeguard, I reduced it from 15 down to 5, and cashiers from 4 to 1. So that just reflects what our operations is going to be going forward when we get going. I mentioned that we needed a new meter technician, and so we have 2 now. That was one additional. These 2 plant operators are laborers, and they got their D certifications, and so now they're qualified to be plant operators, so we're just moving them up. Now, this one's a little more complicated. This is internal services, and since it was a new department that was created last year, we've had a little bit of problems staffing it and trying to get the staff correct. Internal services superintendent, I'm reducing that and creating a new building purchase services supervisor, which will be for buildings and equipment, and these 2 positions. Want to add a building technician. We need to, when we go back and get this adopted, what I want to do is add a building maintenance technician. Okay. And that was all was contemplated when I increased the rates for building services among all the departments. So the money's there to pay for that additional building maintenance tech.
Oh, we're not doing this one.
Okay. So that's it. Any other questions?
But just again, to recap, that all of these positions we just discussed for reorg are contemplated in the amendment. So we're assuming they accompany that. So when you look at the cost, again, the $2 million surplus accounts for all these changes. And as you see in all those, it's mainly a kind of a readjustment, change in titles. It's not really, we're not truly adding net any new positions.
Yeah, if I had my druthers, I'd rather add more staff because we absolutely need them, but we don't have any place to put them.
The exception being the building inspectors, as we explained.
Right.
Because they can pay for themselves, we think we can go ahead with them right away. But typically, we would not add new positions mid-year. That would be done in the budget process.
Okay.
Charles, you did a good job.
Well, I'd just say, I think it emphasizes again, it's when you run an $18-19 million business, it's a lot of money, a lot of different answers, a lot of numbers, and so we're always wanting people to know more about our finances and our financial situation, but it's tough to answer really detailed questions off the top of your head in a setting like this. So we encourage, certainly not just the council, but anybody that wants to know any more details about anything to do with our money, they're welcome to get a meeting with Charles and myself or anybody else. We want people to know, and certainly certainly these days, we, from an operations standpoint, as you could tell from tonight's presentation, we have a positive story to tell, and certainly some of the goals we've had here as a council for the last year or two are becoming a reality, so feel good about that part.
So council, under new business, Charles just explained the ordinance, but this is, as you can tell, obviously a whole lot of information to take on at one time. Do we have any comments or any questions possibly on what we've been given, the presentation? It's my opinion, and of course I'll listen to anybody else, but it's my opinion that because of the depth of information given to us, that we table this ordinance for the next meeting. That gives us, in this case, 3 weeks to do our homework, do our research, come back. You don't have to wait 3 weeks. If you have questions, if you have comments, please send them to the city manager and myself so that we can start working on what you may want to know more about. But that's just my opinion, and I'm certainly willing to listen to anybody else that has any other thoughts.
Do you need a motion to table?
Yes.
I would.
I just didn't know if anybody else had any other thoughts before we did that.
It's a lot, and we have a lot of new people here, so I agree with that.
Yeah, a lot to
I
absorb.
mean, it's some really good,
Yeah,
promising information.
absolutely. Okay, if there's no other discussion, I'll entertain a motion to table.
I would make a motion that we table the amendment to the budget till the next meeting.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, so the motion has been made by Councilmember Dennis to table ordinance item number 1 under new business until the next council meeting, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Brasher. We'll start the vote with Councilmember Dennis.
Dennis, yes?
Frazier, yes.
Ramirez, yes.
Vega, yes.
Gibson, yes.
Maldonado, yes.
Callahan, yes.
Ibis, yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Gwen, did you want to get a picture in real quick, or do you mind listening to the rest of it? It's up to you. We can get a picture in if you want with the Juneteenth. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Gwen, I read it at 6:30 when the meeting started. So we can get a picture taken if you want.
Byron, you're going to stay for the whole meeting, right?
Long now, Byron.
Don't take it this way while I'm trying to. Turn it this way while I'm trying to.
How you doing, Coach Mason?
So, yes, it was a very nice proclamation. I'm very honored to read it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry that we put it at the same time, but. Okay. Let's go to item number 2 under new business. A resolution of the City of Elgin, Texas, authorizing the city manager to award a bid for the City of Elgin Police Department roof repair project to Jamar Roofing and Sheet Metal of Austin, Texas, and making certain findings related thereto. Tom?
Thank you, Mayor. This item, as stated, is pretty much self-explanatory, or the information you saw in the packet. We have close to an emergency situation at the police department. Obviously, we're having, Charles mentioned this earlier, leaks and repairs that need to be made, and obviously there's a lot of important equipment and data that's stored in that building. So technically it is an emergency repair, and that's why we need to move forward pretty quickly. As stated in the staff report, had the CO project program move forward as planned, we would have been able to utilize some of those funds to pay for this project, but as it is, this is an unbudgeted expenditure of approximately $30,000 to do that repair. We kind of don't, not really much of a choice. We need to move forward with it as soon as possible, so.
Okay, council, do we have any questions or comments? I think everyone, just like Tom said, I'm sure everyone is aware, if he's been in that Elgin Police Department building, that we need to do something so that when it rains, they're not putting buckets out everywhere trying to. Okay, if nobody has any questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion. I'm sorry?
Ron, was there more than one bid?
No, I don't think so. We had trouble finding this bidder in this climate that would come. That's why we want to make sure it's clear it's an emergency situation. Well, as everybody knows, trying to get a roofer today in a quick time frame is pretty tough, so.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Do I hear a motion?
I had made a motion, Mayor.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion has been made by Mayor Pro Tem Brasher, seconded by Councilmember Dennis to approve item number 2 under new business as read. The vote starts with Mayor Pro Tem Brasher.
Frazier, yes.
Ramirez, yes?
Vega, yes.
Gibson, yes.
Maldonado, yes.
Callahan, yes.
Ibis, yes.
Dennis, yes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 3, a resolution of the City of Elgin, Texas, authorizing the city manager to negotiate final terms and award a contract to Austin Traffic Signal Construction Company, Incorporated of Round Rock, Texas, for the County Line Road School Zone Beacons Construction Project and making certain findings related thereto.
Mayor, this is an item that I know the council is aware of. We've discussed on numerous previous occasions. This proposal is based on council's direction for the city engineer to develop a working and compliant project to place the appropriate number of school beacons on County Line Road. And that's the item that's before you this evening. We, from a staff position, frankly, as we've talked about before, it would not be our recommendation to move forward with this project at this time, mainly because it is part of the County Line Road Phase 1 project and will be done at that time, as soon as we figure out where we're going to get the money to start that project. It's also an opportunity to have these signals. We wouldn't be in a position to say definitively today that where these signals would be placed would not have to be relocated later. But the council's direction was to move forward. We did that, and we're making this presentation tonight based on that analysis. We have a plan where we think we can install them as shown, but it's another function of both this item and the next item, frankly, are examples of the way the construction market is today. And while $60,000 project is a whole lot for us in today's market with the contractors we need to do this, that they see that as a relatively small project. And so Bo really struggled to find any bidders, let alone competitive bids. So it's certainly a significant cost, and that's another reason why it wouldn't be the staff recommendation to move forward. But having said all that, it's an issue, again, that we've talked about plenty of times, and it's ripe for council to consider and provide staff direction to move forward because, well, we're fulfilling what council asked us to do, so that's why the item's on the agenda.
Council, do I hear any comments, any questions possibly?
Mayor, I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious, for these proposals that come to us that are not funded, I know that they can be challenging because we strive to find a balance. Some of them are necessary, like the roof at PD. Some of them are nice to have. Some of them we can consider essential. I think because we're moving into budget as well as taking a closer look at five-year capital plan, that this might be a great example of, we might consider how we prioritize this, add it to the list of five-year capital plan eventually. I mean, that would be a whole council call. I know that we have a track record with grants and other things that we've been able to secure, so if we're not able to move ahead now, it might be something that we consider later and maybe work to identify funds that we can apply.
Okay, good points. Anyone else?
I just have a
Yes,
question.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yes, so in the, developer county line road fund, I know there was some question as to if those funds could be used, and I guess it's up to council's discretion, but the city was not in favor of doing that. How much is in that fund currently?
I guess I don't know off the top of my head. I wouldn't, it wouldn't be, we didn't even ever remember to say that there's any confusion about that. Those are city funds.
Okay.
City council controls how we spend any city funds. It's up to council's discretion. As I've said, though, I'm quite sure that's not what those funds were intended for. Those funds were intended to build a whole new road. The people that live out there that are paying their share of that cost now, that's not what the development agreement says, that's what those funds will use for. I'm sure there's $60,000 in there. That's what you're asking.
Well, I'm just wondering, have
but-
any funds out of that account been used?
Yes, to pay the engineering, to do phase one engineering for the project.
Okay, so everything else is there, just phase one engineering?
It's a $5 million project, almost maybe $6 million by the time we build the road and engineering. That's the funds that the developers pay based on a formula and in their development agreement. So that's what those funds are intended for, to rebuild the road, but also to pay for the engineering to do the plans to rebuild the road.
Right, yeah, I was just wondering if we could get, the current balance of that fund. I don't know if,
Well, we can
You know,
get
Charles.
it, but I guess I'm not understanding the relevance. I'm telling you, there's $60,000 in there. That's what this project is for.
right, yeah, no, I was just wondering,
Yes.
We can get you,
yes,
we
Okay.
can get you the
yes.
balance, absolutely.
Okay.
But
Yes.
we may not have it right this second, but we
Okay.
can certainly get you the balance, yeah.
okay.
And we could have had it if you'd
Okay,
let me know
yeah, no, I
before.
would, and, I was just wondering, were there any other bids, or was this another situation where there was only,
It's another situation where part of the delay in bringing the project forward was Bo had great difficulty in finding anybody that was willing to bid on it.
Bo, would you address up here, please?
Just because of the nature and the size of this project, it was hand-delivered to every contractor that's in the city currently to try to get them to bid. It was posted publicly to the bidding boards for anyone that tracks it. And then we literally went down the white pages calling every single signal company to see if they would be of any interest or provide any kind of costing. ATS was the only one, and it was more of a favor to provide a costing on the project. Just everybody is super swamped, and they're already stretched thin on the contracts that they do have. It's just not a material size project, and you are probably paying a premium to get them to even come out just to mobilize for something of this size.
So that's the point that I wanted to make in that, knowing everything that you said and the city manager said about having trouble finding a company that would do a project this small, I'm flabbergasted by the price that they're quoting us for four. And I went out and drove that road today, and the current signs that are there are all on a little slab, on a little block slab. I mean, they're not even underground, they're all sitting on a block slab. And so apparently this company wants to charge us $45,000 they're probably gonna do the same thing, right?
It's a little bit deeper foundation because it's a little bit heavier of a sign just because of, it's solar, and so you are attaching all of that. So it is a little bit more of a design foundation than what's currently out there. What currently out there kind of tipped down, you could just simply go put it back up. If one of these were to tip down, you're probably damaging it and you're replacing it at that point in time. So there's a little bit more of the form work. But yes, if you were to go in and say, give me the material costs, taxes delivered to the site, and then you look at what the actual install cost is for the contractor, they're definitely charging you a premium to mobilize to Elgin to do that when they might be on a continuous project somewhere else.
And I believe that all of us here on the council understand the safety concerns that we have around all schools, not just this school. Currently, right now, the signs that are posted they've met every safety concern as far as the road is.
From when council redid the study with TxDOT's approval, it went back in, we reduced the length of the zones. School board, it went before them, they were in favor of that due to it. And all the studies, so the last time council took action, put the signs where they're at, they meet all code standards, they meet all agencies in the school board as far as what they wanted to see out there.
So now it depends on the driver to actually pay attention to what's out there. And the question is the driver gonna pay any more attention to a flashing signal than they are to a sign when they know that, or most of them know that it's a school zone? I kind of agree with Councilmember Vega. This $60,000, we don't have $60,000 to just offhandedly go pay for something that, in my opinion, is very, very overpriced. Yes, Councilmember Callahan.
Why are we limited to the Austin market as far as contractors go? When I was a contractor and I was in Fort Worth, I would have busted my chops to come down here and do a job.
Not for that size to all the way, and it's on the, like I said, it's posted on the public boards. So contractors all over the country could literally zero in, for instance, y'all's contractor doing the wastewater treatment plant, they're based out of the Houston area.
Right.
And they're coming in to do that, but that's a.
So it's not just limited to the Austin area?
No. As far as us calling, I don't know of anyone who's working at any of our municipalities in Dallas or the Houston areas that's gonna travel that for that cost, because then they're having to meet all the materials. But as far as the Rolodex, it's out there for everyone to see. It's publicly posted for people to bid on Simcast.
Yeah, I can imagine the Austin market is buried and has been for a long time anyway,
Yeah.
as busy as it is there.
It's just a difference between, multi-million-dollar project versus a very small project to come down there.
I just have a
Yes.
question. Is this something, if the city somehow procured, the beacons or whatever, could the city do the installation, or is this beyond
No.
something?
No,
Your city does not do
No.
concrete.
Okay.
no, we can't do that.
What did you say, Bo?
City does not do concrete work
Okay,
and,
I see.
and wire, rebar and weld and tie all of that together. That's just not in the current forces.
Good question, though. Councilmember Evans.
Mayor, I'd just like to say regarding the funds that are available for the road construction project, that I think that the understanding from the developers is that money that they're putting forward is for a permanent capital project. It's not for temporary projects. And, if we decided, we're gonna do this, and then something else came up, and well, that's another temporary project, and then all of a sudden, we're gonna temporary project ourselves out of the funds to do the project. So, I think it would be inappropriate to use those funds for this project.
Okay. Anyone else?
I agree. with that statement. The money was put in and bartered for or bargained for or whatever we did. We was to create a better road. And so are we gonna, will the city then get pushback from those developers because we're spending their money vicariously? Is it being spent the way it was not intended to be done?
Okay?
Mayor, I'll
Yes,
just
sir.
add, I agree with Sue. I think we talked about this last time as well, that why would we try to spend the funds in a different way, knowing that we're bound to spend it a certain way? So I don't know if we should set ourselves up for that precedent. Every time something comes around that is not funded, that we think we can just spend earmarked money a certain way. That's not best practice, and that's not anything that, my understanding, we're allowed to do, and why would we even entertain the idea? I think we should stack this against all the other projects that are on the 5-year capital plan. This is a great example of a project that council or any of our citizens might come to us about and talk about perhaps including in a global plan, not one that comes out of the blue. I understand the importance of it. I think it is important, but I also think that we stack it against everything else and prioritize over time, really work to see what can be done eventually. Unfortunately, I don't know if we're able to do it right now in this next year.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
I would like to make a motion to table this.
You want to table this for a certain time frame? For
I would
instance,
say
for the
ta-
5-year,
table-
to be discussed during the 5-year
table
plan?
it, yes.
Mayor, I would just suggest that the action before the council is to award this bid and authorize the contract. It's not gonna, that price isn't gonna be something we're locked into indefinitely. So if we're not inclined to do this contract tonight, the council doesn't, you don't necessarily have to table the issue to
Okay.
bring it up again.
Okay.
We can bring it up later. So see what I'm saying?
Right, we can
This
just move
is
on.
a specific action item relative to this contract. If we're not going to do that, we should not vote for the resolution, but that doesn't prevent us from bringing the issue up at the very next meeting, the policy issue, if you know what I mean. So whether or not we approve this
So do we need to
tonight
make a
doesn't-
motion to not approve this item?
Not necessarily. If it doesn't get a motion to approve, you can
Okay.
move, you can
That
move
makes sense.
on. And then, but that, I guess I want to make clear, that doesn't mean that's the final decision on the project.
Okay, with that understanding, if I don't have a motion to approve item number 3, we're going to move on to item number 4. Do we have a motion?
And I'll just say for the record, at least the research we've done to this point, it won't be hard to turn it into a project that we
Yeah.
can put in the 5-year
If
plan.
council comes back and says we still wanna do that exact same thing, the engineering's done, it's sitting on the shelf, it's not changing for this specific project, so it'll just come back off
That's
and go
gonna be
back
your
out to
cue.
try to find additional bids.
In like 2 more items, okay?
So we're not backing up, is what I'm
Yeah.
getting at. We can stop here, but we can always come back to this point.
So most bids have a drop dead date?
For theirs, they were actually hoping for an answer right away. They just kind of said, at least within 30 days for that particular quote that we got from ATS. If not, if council decides to pull it back off the shelf, go back out there, maybe the market's improved, or maybe you get more interest, they would probably, most likely, there would be one that would bid it anyway. But yeah, just none of the large contractors even wanted to put it under their shoe. They're just so far behind.
Our bigger projects have a definitive drop dead date on how long the bids are going. But,
Okay.
yeah, I found out today from the guy that's gonna do the roof of my house that bids change. They go up,
Okay,
I
let's
guess,
go,
now.
let's go to, do we have any motion made on item number 3? And if not, I'm going to move on to item number 4 under new business. Moving on to item number 4 under new business, A resolution of the City of Elgin, Texas, authorizing the city manager to negotiate final terms and award a contract to J.O. Gray Construction Incorporated of Georgetown, Texas, for the Hillside Drive at Old MacDade Road Traffic and Safety Improvements Project, and making certain findings related thereto.
Thank you, Mayor. This item actually has some similar elements to the one we just discussed. I know council has, we've certainly discussed this project a number of times. If you recall, this was the one project of the 4 traffic and safety improvements we had talked about and council approved that was going to require a bigger investment of time and money. And while most of the elements, like with the other projects we've been able to do with city forces, this is one that was going to require a contractor. And the biggest part is to do this strip of pavement and the curb and gutter that would be here to create this traffic lane, to keep continuous flow of traffic in the intersection like we talked about in the beginning. If you recall, one of the staff recommendations was to stop the opportunity to turn there, and we wouldn't require this lane. But in order for us to deliver on what council had wanted, to keep all existing traffic lanes flowing, but just in a safer manner, that we've got a part of that we have to hire a contractor for. That's the bid you have in the packet. And this is where it turns into some similar issues to what we just talked about with the school zone beacons. Again, Bo tried, this is a little more conventional. We actually thought we would be a little more optimistic that we could find a contractor to do this, but it's, frankly, the same issues. They're all making so much money. I think while $75,000 is a whole lot to us, it's not to them compared to other jobs. So I don't. Bo and I both believe we're certain that bid's certainly a premium based on the market we're in. So I think there's one. This is another one where we brought this forward following council's direction, and so we have an opportunity to finalize this with this engagement tonight. The plan that we had originally discussed with council and where we be able to go forward with, but it also is a very similar issue. I think Bo and I both agree that while a good project and when we want to eventually do this part, there may be some modifications that we can do in-house that won't be as good of the project as we talked about here, but they would be temporary measures, and that maybe 6 months, something like that, we might be able to rebid it again. And this is another project that really depends on whether projects we're doing in town or the school district or something else. It's really kind of we're going to pay a real premium to have a contractor out and do this job, a standalone job. But if we can catch somebody that has a couple free days and a crew out here and is already mobilized in town, that's where we can get a more competitive price. But having said all that, we're prepared to go ahead right now, but this is a sizable amount, again, that's not in the budget for this year.
And again, engineering is done, so it's not expiring. It's sitting on a shelf to be pulled out or combined with, like Tom said, another project potentially the city has in the future or something to that extent.
And Tom, did I hear you say that there's a possibility that the city could do other adjustments that would help a little bit or help somewhat?
Yeah,
We go back
Bo
to some
had-
of those other plans that
to
we
what
looked
you
at.
had brought up, yeah.
Just
Right.
cleaning up some of the right of way there, repositioning of some of the signs, just some minor tweaks that city staff could do.
So we can make some of these improvements and
Okay.
at least upgrade where we started on the beginning of this. We just, we can't move forward with the full project without this engagement, but frankly, we haven't discussed all the specifics on what we think we could do in the interim.
Yes,
Comment,
Councilwoman
question. Yeah, we spent some time talking about this. One of the things that I was recently talking to Tom about is just reminding of the original idea behind improvement here. Really, it was a few concerns, well, more than a few concerns, folks coming out of Hillside Apartments at that particular stop sign, look left. I guess it's up Old MacDade Road. They couldn't tell when traffic was coming, so that's the source issue, basically. All of this other stuff, again, to me, is nice to have. I think if we can address the source issue, which is if you're coming out of Hillside and you look left and you can't tell if a car's coming, our solution to that was approving the stop sign there at the 500 block of Old MacDade Road. So I think that if we can certainly consider what staff is able to do, stick as close to our original plan, I think that's a great balance, a great start for improvement in that area. I don't think that part is too much to ask. I do think that, like our previous discussion, anything above that, it certainly would need to be considered more long-term, perhaps considered or stack it against, as I said earlier, with all the other projects that we're considering in the next couple of years. So I'd like to maybe throw that out for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Did we already put that stop sign, that one stop sign?
No,
No.
because the project kind of grew
Okay,
as more must-haves to it.
Okay.
And so that's how we ended up, was trying to maintain all the same turning movements for all same traffic
Okay.
conditions at all times that meets MUTCD code, essentially, so.
Councilmember Gibson, that's your driveway.
That is my job.
Do you have any comments, Councilmember Gibson?
Well, I'm just trying to see what was going on here and what the proposed thing, because I missed that
Okay, yeah,
discussion.
right.
See, so what is the project as it is up there? How is it supposed to?
Essentially, one of the recommendations was to not allow people to make that left-hand turn when you're going Brenham out to Old McDade to make that a left-hand turn on Old McDade Road, because you have through traffic and you have the potential for someone running into the back. And so one of the first easiest ways to make that a safer intersection was to eliminate people being able to make that turn. One of the council members said absolutely not, you have to be able to make that left-hand turn there. So the only way we can fit in the correct number of lanes and to have it as a designated left-hand turn lane is to essentially widen Brenham Street. And we need about 4 feet, which means removing the curb and gutter in that particular area, putting it back down, and providing a certain distance of widening the street to allow that left-hand turn to continue.
That's where we started at in the beginning, maintaining the left-hand turn for,
Was a big
what was
add.
that, down northbound traffic turning left on Old McDade. That's really what's driving all this cost, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that
It's essentially,
it-
we're trying to widen Brenham Road for a
Yes.
stretch that would allow that.
As Jessica said, that if we could move that sign up, we could solve that issue of visibility, but it's the problem of really all this, in my opinion, 75% of this whole plan is driven by, and the cost, by trying to maintain that left-hand turn.
Correct.
If we were willing to say no left turns there, then it goes back to a simple project that the staff could do ourselves, right?
Pretty much, yeah. You're putting in signs and buttons and you're creating an island out there to try to get rid of just that no man's land of asphalt, very similar to the Ramirez, where people are
Right.
looking at everybody else, who's going first, who's done it, who has the yield and the right of way to make whatever turn. And just because it was just a big asphalt area.
And I have to say that the adjustments we made on Ramirez Road seem to have have a good traffic pattern going now, where people actually have to stop and understand who's going next, and so that worked out good. So if we can do something like that, in my opinion, if we can do something at least similar, I'm not saying the same thing as Ramirez Road, I'm just saying let the city make the adjustments for the time being, that's a good scenario for me.
I think the truth is, like Ramirez Mayor, we might be able, we would do something, we could do something that would be temporary.
We could do something that's temporary. We would go back
But,
and maybe
but
council.
it is, just to be clear, that was what we recommended to begin with. But Bo's right, it's different council members at the time, and there was a strong feeling then that left-hand turn had to be maintained. But if we were willing to talk about not allowing that left-hand turn, but do it in a temporary way, just to see how people reacted to it, that certainly, I think, has an opportunity to be a lot more cost-effective project.
With the understanding that the The adjustments that we made in the two spots we already addressed, they are temporary. And we're seeing how it's working. We're seeing what kind of feedback we're getting. We're seeing the traffic patterns out there. So, I mean, that's something that easily, in my opinion, could be done out here.
Yeah.
Rather than spend $65,000.
That's a lot of.
Yeah. Yes,
Could we put in a toll booth for people that want to turn left?
as long as you're willing to put it up. Councilmember Callahan?
I'll be out there tomorrow.
Okay.
I would say that, well, recently I've changed groomers for my dogs, and so I have to go out McDade Road every other Friday. So each time I go by there, I think, what on earth are we gonna do here? And how are we gonna fix this? It's just crazy. And then coming back in, to put a stop sign there on McDade Road coming in where you're trying to decide, do I go right on McDade, or do I, continue on Brenham? And that's always a confusing thing to me, because I find when I go McDade, I'm gonna wind up over in, having to make all kinds of weird turns and all. But nonetheless, I don't know, it started out, this was gonna be, the four intersections that we've been talking about. We're gonna be able to be city-managed
Right.
projects, and for it to have grown to something that is bigger than life now, this is something we need to probably consider longer term. And I'm just concerned that doing it ourselves at that intersection with all that needs to be done, that are we going to compromise safety by putting a stop sign somewhere where it's just totally unexpected? Are we gonna have rear end collisions and all that sort of thing? And because it is a feeder road, as Bo says, and when you get on it, you're intending to continue and not have a stop sign in the middle of it.
And
Well, I'd just say this is obviously a sound engineering plan based on what we have to work with.
Yep.
But I do think it, again, even at stop sign, I'm not sure, but I would just say, again, all of this, so much of this, you talk about the project growing and all that, was made very complicated by insisting on continuing that left-hand turn. We'll be glad to dust off that plan and bring it back, and I think the comparison to Ramirez is really a good one, in the sense that it's another road that has this big spot in the middle that doesn't seem to have any purpose or any striping or anything, and that's where people get confused. So if council's so inclined, we'll revisit that from a minimalistic standpoint and see what we can come up with on a temporary idea. But like I said, frankly, that's going to be a wasted effort if everybody's insistent, or majority is, that we have to maintain that left turn. We may have to be willing to give that up, at least on a temporary basis, to do something more affordable.
Well, we did it at Avenue A,
Mhm.
so that's not any difference. It's just something that you're gonna have to get used to, because there's a safety issue there.
Agreed. Well, we'll take a look at that.
So item number 4 under new business as read, do I hear a motion to move approval, or do I hear a motion to approve item number 4 as read? If I hear no motion, I'm going to move on. Okay, no motion. Let's go to item number 5 under new business. Review and discussion of the proposed City of Elgin 2021 5-year capital plan. And council members, you're aware that we gave you this, we gave you the 5-year capital plan last meeting, and then we asked you to start looking at it because it's something that we're going to have to address here fairly soon. We also sent you an email asking for you to at least, to help all of us start prioritizing maybe your top 5 projects under the capital, under the 5-year capital plan. So I'm not asking necessarily that you have it done already, but I'm asking that you really take it seriously and have it done soon. Tom, did you want to start with? what we
Yeah,
got?
I've got a couple things real quick. I mean, since, one thing I wanted to mention again, that since our last presentation, that to make clear with people that, again, the city of Elgin in the last 5 years has had amazing success with grants and securing funds on outside resources. We talked about, we've already done, in that time period, $21 million worth of capital improvements in the city, and a third of those funds, over $7 million, have come from grants or outside resources. So I know the mayor's gotten a couple questions, and we are absolutely committed to securing grants and developer funds. We talked about a lot of that tonight, wherever we can, to supplement these projects. But I think the number one key in helping that part of our operation is for the council to give us direction about what are the top priorities. We've got $50 million worth of projects in here, and if the staff tries to get a grant for every one of them, that one, we wouldn't know how to handle all those grants, and two, it's not a productive use of our time. So that's where this will help. If it works as almost marching orders for the staff, if the council agrees, here's the main things we want you to be focused on. I wanted to review the couple recap pages that are right at the front. So the top of that page is what lists those $21 million worth of projects that we've done. I think this is page 1, maybe behind the memo. And then below this line on this shows basically what the staff has proposed for funding out of the current year budget, which is holiday lights and tree light banners, but we use hotel motel tax funds for those. It has, I thought, given the big news and the status of our situation, although we won't be spending any of the money on the roadway flooding prevention project probably this year, or we'll just start into that next fiscal year. It's important enough in our planning, is why we included it in here. And then at the bottom of the page is the $28 million in projects that we're funding in part from the 21 certificates of obligation. So the point is, the bottom half of this page is, this is the list of what we consider active projects that currently have funding support that we'll be working on as we move forward. And then, and again, just because we've talked about it so much, just want to review one more time our CO project that we just borrowed $14 million for, because of combining that with savings and private contribution and grants. The city will actually receive literally double that amount in improvements. We borrowed $14 million, and that will eventually go to help fund $28 million in improvements to our water and wastewater systems. But then these next couple pages, these are all the projects, and we've put them in order of the staff ranking. You see that column in the box to the right of each project. That's our viewpoint of but it relates to each department. It's not an attempt to list all the projects in a prioritization order, and that's, again, what we look to council to do. Obviously, this year, the next few years, the good news is we have a really good, now in a good spot for capital funding for our utility operations, both water and wastewater. So I would say these are longer-term projects, the staff views that we have in here. So, but that is an area that at least we can feel confident about, that we've got the funding set aside, we've got the projects listed it is the one area, frankly, that we can feel good about the next 5 years or so that we're up to speed on. So as the mayor mentioned, what he and I had talked about is this idea, we haven't done this in the past, but rather than try to come up with a master list where you're trying to list all 50 projects, that it might be simplest if we could just start with kind of a top 5 list. And so I actually had asked the mayor if he would be willing to share his list just to help start the conversation. So this is what the mayor has prioritized from his individual view of the projects. And I think the other part that, frankly, that we're dealing with now is that I really feel like the council spent the first half of this year in our review of the COs that was a process where we prioritized those projects then. So as you can see from this list, which frankly would be pretty much what my individual list would be as a top 5 list. So it really is kind of consistent with what we were talking about on the CO program. But anyway, it's a way to start the conversation. And what I would envision is, in the past, we've had council pass a resolution saying that to adopt the 5-year plan, but if we could get a consensus amongst the council, the top 5, top 10, whatever, we could incorporate that in the actual resolution the council passes. And so that would provide direction. I would say, too, that there's real value. It's not only for the staff and council, but there's actually really real value, in my experience, to the community when we can tell them, even in cases where we may not have the money today, that we get on the record to make clear to the public that here's what our priorities are, and as soon as we get the funds together, this is the projects we'll be working on, rather than having, which we have a big list, and they're all good projects, and they all probably need to be done eventually, but having a group understanding about, well, what we're really focused on in the short run, I think is helpful to everybody. So, and as the mayor said, we're trying to, don't want to stretch out the meeting for another couple hours, but by having this discussion tonight, we're kind of avoiding having to have a work session. So if we can come out of it with some consensus, that would help us, but we'd be glad to meet again. Oh, and I don't know if I have this, I got that project if we want to come back to it. So we've kind of pushed back our schedule, as we've talked about, based on our joint meeting with the school board this week. So if we can get close to some consensus tonight, then our next meeting, we'd schedule the public hearing to allow public comments, and then the second meeting in July, we'd try to get the plan adopted, obviously, and then the first meeting in August is when we present the budget. So that's why we'd like to stick to this schedule and obviously get the 5-year plan adopted before the budget. So if we need to make any changes in the budget, that we'll be able to do that. So with that, I guess that's all I had, unless anybody had any questions for me.
If we had other stuff that we thought about to add to this, do we just send that to you?
Sure. I think in the end, again, the way we've done it in the past is individual council members have asked us to look at projects. We've put a page together and then had the council vote, the whole council as a whole vote to include those or not. I think it's.
Just because you're cute. I have one too, though.
It's, yeah, but at the end of the day, I mean, that's the other part too, I guess I'd say, we've talked about this over and over. There are a couple projects in here that we've certainly got to get in a better financial position, or maybe a way off. At the same time, we try not to make a wish list that has wild projects that don't have a chance to reality. So I feel pretty good about this. It's a list of projects that will all be done at some point, when the city can afford them and do them. So yes, and I think, part of that is the project we just talked about. There's a lot of things in the older established part of town that could be on this list. But yes, this is the opportunity for council members to get those all in. So I don't see it necessarily being a situation where there's going to be a big debate about including something in the plan. So yeah, pretty much anybody that wants to submit something, we'll be glad to try to put that together as an addendum for anything later.
And Sue, or anybody else, if you want to bring it up, your particular project tonight, let us start thinking about it. That's certainly.
And I've already discussed it with Tom, so he knows what I'm talking about. But I thought it would be good for us to get ahead of things with all the water pipes and sewer pipes that break all the time, to get a Bo or a John Calhoun in the water wastewater department to gather a list of everywhere that we have clay pipe, any asbestos line pipe, and then start working on a way where we could upgrade those. Not all at one time, but at least have an idea and a view forward.
It's a great idea.
And I understand that the majority of it is gonna be in Old Elgin, but, you know, I think in the long run, it would help city staff for sure, because we wouldn't have busted pipes all the time.
And that's an example of something that Sue knows that we, for years, the city's always done what they could. When you have a problem in this line, in this location, you have a number of breaks. It's like, lead pipe. There's still some lead pipe somewhere in town, but oftentimes we don't know about those until we dig the hole, until there's a leak. Well, in those locations, we try to replace all we can, but yeah, that's not really the way to address that. We need a more comprehensive, longer-term view of those things, and we're trying to put that information together, but this plan is also about placeholder for those ideas. So whether or not we had a bunch of specifics this year, still doesn't mean we couldn't put something in here to make that known that we're working that way.
And the other thing that I brought it up before, and I think I've been in open council, is that we have all of these things, and they're all great ideas from everybody's part, but I would like the city to be more proactive and getting them as engineered as they possibly can be, once we maybe get the top 5. We have this top 5, and then make sure that they are a ready to go, shovel-ready project, so that when a big grant comes up, or when there is funding that we could reach out to help us along, we are ready to go. We don't have to stop and say, hey, Bo, you gotta figure out 6 months of this information, and you gotta go over here and do this. I just think on the bigger ones, or maybe it's the top 5 that we rank every year, that they be ready to go, truly ready to go.
And that could come from prioritization, as soon as we get that together. I think the other part too is for a plan like this to work, there has to be a commitment to it. We just went through a process where we made a long-term commitment to projects and came right up to the 9th inning and had things change on us. So yeah, that's there has to be buy-in from the start for this planning to work, and so I agree with that too, that we can, not only from the grant standpoint, but from an engineering standpoint, if we're in agreement about what our main projects are, then we can feel comfortable investing in those.
And that's all.
So I have 2 questions, unless you want to jump in and make your proposal.
No.
I have two. I have a question and then something to consider. First of all, I thought number 5 is funded. That's a $1.4 million project, and it's funded all but $25,000. Why aren't we doing it?
No, it's more than $100,000. We have to come up with the match, yes. There's
I'm
2
looking-
combined projects, that's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
There's a matching portion for it. It's moving forward, but we still have to come up with a match on it.
Okay.
And that's one of the reasons for us, I put those in there, is county line road improvements, well, it's gonna be a while before we get the money to do.
Sure.
But the Elgin Memorial Park restrooms and the MLK and North Main sidewalks, that's money that we could come up with fairly soon to accomplish.
Yeah.
So that's a couple reasons that they're on.
And we do have grants committed to that, and I'm wondering if those are gonna expire before we get to the project.
The sidewalks? I would assume not. I mean, like I said, it's 100,000, you know the number off the top of your head, Amy?
About 100,000 combined for both projects.
Right.
They're 2 separate grants running simultaneously with each other.
So you're right, it's I forget, $1.5 million project. That all we have to come up with was 100,000. But the point is, that's another thing, the funding was planned for, very specifically set aside in the COs. So today, that funding we don't have. I would assume we're gonna come up with it, though.
And so,
To your point, we're not
Yeah.
gonna pass on a $1.5 million grant just because we can't come up with $100,000. I
Right.
assume we
Yeah.
will, but it's just important to understand that money's not, we don't have that set aside today.
is one, if it's two things, is one of them further funded than the other one? And,
No, not really.
They're kind of, they're two different funding mechanisms, and they plus or minus about the same amount of match, so.
okay,
One through Main Street and one through TxDOT, Safe Routes to School.
That's right.
okay. So then my
And
proposal.
I guess I want to say too, to clarify that, since you brought it up, of course. We're really careful to be consistent with the numbers that are in the 5-year plan and what we've been saying in the COs. So those are very consistent, reflective. I mean, that's the truth of every one of these projects. Every one of these projects on this list, as you know, we had to change what we were writing up to the 5-year plan because we thought they were all going to be funded. And so when the rug got pulled out from us, yeah, they're all in a different boat, and some are different amounts, but yeah, we don't have funding for anything now.
So my item that I'd like to add to the list, I've brought it up before when we've had this conversation and somehow it didn't make it to the book, is there are several through alleys between Main Street and Avenue C. Most of them are gravel. Fortunately, the one that goes by my house is paved, but you're taking your life in your own hands. But it's become a through street, really, almost, because we have everybody but neighbors that drive that thing. And that's the case on the gravel ones as well. The one that's down there by WC and the Simmons and goes through, that one's gravel. And I think that we need to do something to improve that, make sure that we have good base and good asphalt and that sort of stuff, that they're properly treated, because if nothing else, our trash pickup comes through there, and especially over at Deborah's house, there's a great big rut that, just because of the weight of that truck getting over there to the edge, it becomes dangerous for cars going through there. So I just think that we need to look at those specific alleys in that area to see if we can.
Yeah, I think you and I have talked about that before, Forrest, but for me, that quickly turns into a conversation of, we've got problems with alleys all over town.
Sure.
And unless why we haven't included it in here is, I guess, is, from the staff perspective, there's not one alley or anywhere in town that has a need any greater than others. And what we really need to do is first define a policy about what are those alleys going to be, what you're saying of what should the minimum standards be, which ones are we going to open and maintain. We're city's inconsistent about alleys being opened, and which ones we're maintaining, and which ones, some are paved, some are. So I think to me, that's probably why we hadn't dealt with it, because it quickly turns into a big discussion. And we routinely as staff get calls from people, what are you doing with the alley and all that? And my philosophy personally is, if we own it, the city owns it, I hate to give it up, but at the same time, probably need to have a conversation. If we're going to own it, then there should be an alley there at some point. If we're not going to own it, we should figure out a way to close those off. And we just we have no consistency, frankly, in our policy for how alleys are maintained in the older part of town.
Sure.
And so I would just think we probably need to have that conversation before we can start listing specific projects to be done.
I think the reason that ours is paved is because the Barkers were doing a remodel on their garage and all, and he got the neighbors all the way down to, go in together and
Yeah, I
pave
think,
it.
truthfully, I think that's the story all over. When you look at alleys and think, why are they different quality? I think a huge part of it had to do with the people living around it, and how much they were willing to maintain and keep them. And that's also why we kind of thought the downtown alleys are a little different, because it's business element. That's why we almost were thinking about, well, let's start down there. But I agree with you. I guess you can tell it quickly becomes, any question about that for staff becomes, yeah,
But it's
we
not
don't have a
business-friendly.
uniform, what's that?
But then it becomes not business friendly,
Yeah.
because there's people that live in those.
No, that's what I mean. I just thought it was a way to make a distinction and start there,
Yeah.
But if this is the case, then either submit it on your list and it'll be considered for the 5-year plan, or, make it a separate discussion at a, yeah.
And that's the other part of the plan. We could just plug in here to set aside a certain amount every year and do whatever allies we can for that or something like that. So that might be a way to do it too.
Okay, Forrest, anything else?
I'm good, thanks.
Okay, anybody else?
Just quick
Yes.
comment to Forrest's point from earlier. Tom, we talked a little bit about this. This was a question I was trying to ask earlier in the day, is for some of these, we do have some funding, maybe we have it through grant or whatever. We're looking at a particular match. I wonder if maybe a second view of this, the next time we talk about it, we might be able to see, put some, I guess, format this a different way to where we can see which projects have some funding at least, and, what is the match? I realize it's in the book, but from a larger view, it might be easier, especially for the newer council members, to understand that some of these projects, there are funds already earmarked, but we're looking at matches with maybe remaining funds, compared to some that are on the list that have nothing earmarked for them yet. Does that make some sense?
It does, and that's really what this is. That's, the bottom half of this page is the projects, the one exception being the sidewalks we just talked about. But again, that's not included in this list because that isn't fully funded. But the bottom half of this page, those are the only projects that have funds currently earmarked, committed to.
But Tom, if you go to the one where it's the staff's priority,
Wait a minute. This one?
see, we don't have any funding listed there. It'd be good to see.
That's what I'm
On
saying,
this.
Forrest. We don't have any funding set aside for any of these projects.
We have grants on some of them, right?
No. That's why we structured it this way, so you could see, these are all needs where we have no funding for any of them. But as I said, the one MLK sidewalk, I just said, that technically that's why that's on this list. It's not funded now. But that would be the one exception to this.
Okay.
None of these projects currently have any funding. And the other previous page I showed is this is the one at the bottom half. That's the point. It's only the grant we got and the COs. That's the only money we have earmarked. And as you see on this list, that includes almost $19 million in grants. So, and when you look at this list again, when we get done with these projects that we have now funded, and you add them with the projects we did before, that means the city will have completed $60 million worth of projects, and 25 million of that came from grants or outside sources. 40% of the funding will come from outside sources. So we're really doing good as far as recognizing, and we do have included in here all the projects that we have grants for. But this, again, I mean to harp on it, but apparently we still need to understand, when we couldn't move forward with the 10 million we needed for many of these projects, it really put us in a bad spot. So yes, we've got $50 million worth of projects in here that we have no grants for, no commitments, no funding. And it also probably, I think, frankly, clearly illustrates the only way we're going to do these major projects is through financing. We have to issue debt. It's the way everybody in America does it. We can't afford these projects. This is the challenge the council's facing now. We can't fund any of these projects or any significant number of them out of the budget. So yes, that's, I answered your question, Jessica.
I see it now,
This is
yeah.
the list.
I see it, yeah.
The other part is is the only ones we have funding for. And I say only, like I said, it's $39 million that we have, we do have earmarked, but doesn't do anything for the other 50 million. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else have any comments on their five-year plan projects?
Mayor, I'm sorry, can I jump in there? I
Yes.
guess technically, maybe the other part would be on County Line Road, as we've talked about before, we do have developer commitments, but that you could probably plug in here somewhere, but the point is, we don't have enough to start the project. That's why we needed the other money.
Okay. All right, so let's keep in mind what our homework is, right? By next council meeting, we should be, each of you should have emailed myself and the city manager on, it doesn't have to be 5, if it's just 5, if you got 6, if you got 3, whatever you have that you feel is important that we concentrate on, let's get it all together so that we have an idea at the next meeting to actually start narrowing down maybe some projects that really shouldn't be in the 5-year plan, or et cetera, because the staff is looking for our direction, council. I mean, they're looking for our direction as to say, this is what we need to, kind of like Sue was saying earlier, this is what we need to start engineering on, this is what we need to, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, we all know what's expected of us. Okay? Are we ready to move on from item 5? Okay. Let's move on from item 5. We're going to go into executive session. Council will meet in the library room. We'll have a personnel matter to discuss. Take 5 minutes. Okay, I would like to reconvene from executive session and open regular session back up at 9:55 PM. Let's go to, if we're following the agenda, we'll go to announcements. I would like to make an announcement. Council, I want you to think about whether you want to ride in the Western Days Parade. There usually is a vehicle that includes the mayor and council members. And so if you want to ride, I need an email that says you do, so we know, we can figure out how big a vehicle we need. Everyone is aware of when, Western Days is coming up, obviously. So if you want to ride, let me know. Anybody else have any announcements that they want to talk about?
Along that line, do we have a flatbed trailer lined up?
We don't, because we don't know how many people are going to.
Okay. If you need one.
You have one?
Mhm.
Oh, that's good to know. That's
I'll
good
be
to-
riding with the fire department.
You'll be riding with the fire, okay. I mean, email me, I can't remember all this, so just
Yeah, I'm just-
email me, if you want to ride, just email me the next day or two.
If we're using Forest trailers, make sure we get his insurance information for us.
We do have
Maybe I
banners.
don't.
I have
Okay,
two. Congratulations on Councilmember Gibson and him being a new first-time daddy.
congratulations.
And starting Saturday, I believe, the Elgin Little League fields will start hosting district tournaments, and so we'll have lots of out-of-town people coming in, Bastrop, Pflugerville, Taylor, and the like, all around town. So if you want to go watch the kids, they'll be out there, and we're going to have outside neighbors coming in to the city too. That's all.
Okay, anybody else? Staff?
I think so.
Oh, I do have one
Amy's
more.
already gone, so they
I do
don't
have one
get
more.
it.
We don't know what's going on here.
I do have one more announcement, and this is from Amy, by the way.
Well, all right. Well, then you know it's good.
And what Amy would like is she would like to remind council to send pictures to her. Remember the appreciation letters that you all
Yes.
got?
Yeah.
So when you hand them out, and I hope you've been handing some out, send the pictures to Amy so she can post them on the city website.
My people took off to Vegas right when I got them, so now hopefully they're back.
And make sure that you list who's in the picture, because she's already had one where she didn't know, so, okay? Any other questions? I'm sorry, any other announcements?
Everybody got their picture taken tonight? Is that right?
Okay, if there's no further announcements, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We don't have to have a motion.
I know.
Just say adjourn.
No,
So moved.
actually, it's up to me, and so I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn,
I so move, Mayor.
okay?
Second.
So the motion has been made by Councilmember Dennis and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Brasher to adjourn. Councilmember Dennis, if you'll start the vote.
Dennis, aye.
Did you say no?
I said aye.
Oh,
Yes.
okay. Ramirez, yes?
Vega, yes.
Gibson, yes.
Maldonado, yes.
Callahan, yes.
Ibis, yes.
Okay, let's adjourn. At 9:59 PM.